Move over, Ebola. The planet faces a new threat. Well, not so new. The Zika virus has been triggering a mild version of dengue fever since the 1950s in tropical Asia and Africa. Now, though, it has spread to the Americas and beyond, with the World Health Organization warning of a new pandemic that can cause major birth defects. How real is the threat? Whether it's down to globalization, climate change, a bit of both, health authorities throughout South and Central America say they're overwhelmed in their bid to spray the mosquitoes that carry the virus. Is advising Colombians and Salvadoran women not to have children the best we can do? Are there alternatives to using potentially harmful pesticides? More broadly, there's the argument over the politics of disease. As with Ebola and with malaria, does it only become an issue when it reaches rich countries? What's the plan to accurately evaluate the danger to prevent the whole planet from becoming one big no-go zone? Today in the France 24 debate, we're talking about the Zika virus threat. With us, Dr. Yazdan Pana. He's the head of the infectious diseases at Paris's Bichat Hospital. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Hello.
Joining us from Nottingham, England, Dr. Jonathan Ball, professor of virology at the University of Nottingham, who joined us several times when there was the Ebola outbreak. Many thanks for being with us.
No problem. Evening.
From Cumberland, Maryland, Dr. Junie Stone, contributor to Forbes magazine. Thank you for being with us today in the France 24 debate.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
And Cynthia Cardoso of the Brazilian desk of sister station Radio France International. Thanks for being with us.
Hi,
again,
good
Cynthia.
evening.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. The World Health Organization sounding the alarm with countries like El Salvador, Panama, Colombia, Cape Verde in Africa showing, quote, large outbreaks. The biggest, though, Brazil, close to 4,000 cases of microcephaly, birth defect cases. Haxi Myers-Belkin has more.
This is Manuela with her young daughter. She's 16 weeks pregnant with her second child. Her excitement, however, is laced with fear. The Zika virus, a mosquito-borne disease strongly suspected of causing serious birth defects in the babies of infected pregnant women, poses a very real threat.
My doctor tells me to use insect repellent. I don't think there's much to be done. There's no vaccine, and the only preventive method is to not get bitten.
The virus has already spread to 21 of the 55 countries and territories across the Americas. The World Health Organization on Sunday said Zika was likely to spread to all countries in the region, apart from Chile and Canada.
The explosive spread of Zika virus to new geographical areas with little population immunity is another cause for concern.
Brazil has so far reported almost 4,000 suspected cases of fetal deformation linked to the Zika virus. That's over 30 times more than in any other year since 2010.
Cynthia Cardoso, let's start with the latest. In Brazil, the army has been called in, 220,000 troops. They're to go house to house to spray against the disease. And there's a lot of anger. Why is that?
Well, they have to spray. They try to also to find places with standing water, because standing water, of course, is a place for breeding of the mosquitoes. And there's a lot of anger because the government, the population has the impression that it underestimated the outbreak at the beginning, because was said that Zika virus was a mild form of dengue fever with lower symptoms. So the Brazilian government took a lot of time to react. And then, of course, now the population is angry because also the health authorities don't seem to have much of a response to this outbreak. Well, we have the army helping, we have campaigns, but even the health minister told this week that women should not get pregnant or try to avoid to get pregnant. So this is not a clear answer to the problem. Of course, the population is angry.
He even acknowledged that the country's, quote, badly losing the battle against that mosquito.
And that is even a more reason to concern, because this can seem panic panic around the population, because if even the government is saying that they're losing the battle against the mosquito, what can a normal citizen do against such an outbreak?
Judy Stone, is it inexcusable that the government was caught off guard?
No, this is unprecedented. And in outbreaks in Africa, this extent of microcephaly has not been seen. It's important to remember, too, that while there is an increased incidence of microcephaly, it still is less than 1% of pregnancies have that serious birth defect. So this came as a surprise to everybody. One other thing that the government should consider doing, and is in some places, is using the Oxitec mosquitoes to cut down the population as likely being a safer alternative than fumigation.
Explain to us, what are Oxitec mosquitoes?
They're genetically modified mosquitoes which prevent the transmission. When the mosquitoes mate with other mosquitoes, the offspring are sterile, and so it reduces the population that way. And it's a non-chemical way and a very safe way of reducing the mosquito population.
All right, even when it comes to these genetically modified mosquitoes, the government admits, Cynthia Cardoso, that they don't have enough of them on hand right now to deal with the problem. And this is coming, you were telling us before we went on air, ahead of Carnival.
Exactly. It's another reason for concern, because cities like Rio and Salvador in the north of Brazil, that they have big carnival parties. Only in Rio, about 1 million tourists are expected from, of course, from abroad, but also from other regions of Brazil where there is more infection. So, of course, the authorities are very concerned, not even to mention the Olympic Games ahead in only 6 months.
What would you tell people who are thinking of going to the Olympics?
Well, I don't even know. I went to Brazil last year for Carnival, and I was pregnant, and we didn't know exactly about the risk of Zika virus. And I would say to go, and for those who already have tickets, to go and use insect repellents. Well, that's, well, I'll try to prevent with long sleeves, although it's 40 degrees in Brazil, so it's in Rio, it's kind of difficult.
Yeah, Yazdan Pana, do you agree that it's okay to go to?
No, I think that Olympics in 6 months, we don't know what's going to happen in 6 months. And as it was said, Zika is known as a mild disease. 80% of cases are asymptomatic without any clinical symptoms. Most of the cases who are symptomatic are mild cases.
Really, because that's not the way it's playing out.
Yeah.
When I see the Center for Disease Control in the United States putting out travel warnings and...
We acknowledge the fact that, as it was said, this is a surprise that we have these cases of microcephalia. But, and I think people are concerned, they should be concerned, and we should deal with that very seriously. But at the same time, as it was said, this is less than 1% of pregnancies, which is still a lot, but is less than 1% of pregnancies. And for the other adults, there is the risk of syndrome de Guillain-Barré, which is a paralysis of your body, but still it's very rare. And again, in 6 months, we don't know what's going to happen.
So it's a scare?
No, I think it's a scare. It's serious. We should deal with this seriously, but we should also be careful to not give messages that really frighten people, scare people.
Jonathan Ball, do you agree when it comes to the severity so far?
Yeah, it's absolutely right that we need to remember that this is a viral infection which causes, in most people, very, very mild disease, and as rightly said, in most people it doesn't even cause any symptoms at all. I think in a way the Brazilian government and the Brazilian healthcare system need to be congratulated in at least flagging the fact that this microcephaly might be a complication, a rare complication of Zika virus infection, because, you know, as you rightly pointed out, we've known about this virus since 1947. It was first isolated in Africa. This was the first time that we've heard of severe complications being associated with the infection, and we shouldn't scare people, but, you know, clearly there there is a group of people who are at increased risk. That is people, women who are pregnant or who will become pregnant, particularly if they become infected. So I think you need to be very focused on what the real issues are here, and that is potentially there's a problem with Zika virus infection during pregnancy.
All right, in Colombia, health authorities recommending women to wait 6 to 8 months before planning a pregnancy now. That is, if they live near sea level. In El Salvador, a similar story.
This
is why we're recommending couples to plan their pregnancies. If they decide to get pregnant, then they should take the necessary measures to protect the mother during pregnancy. They can do this by covering a large part of their bodies so that they're not exposed to the mosquito which could cause Zika and a child with microcephaly.
What was your initial reaction when you saw this advice to put off having a baby?
I think it was a bit extreme, but on the other hand, we understand because, of course, when you start counting the cases of microcephalia, people were kind of scared because, I mean, it was increased and never seen an epidemic like this in Brazil. So, of course, the first reaction of some doctors were to say, if you could wait to see, because, of course, at the beginning it was not even proved that the Zika virus was responsible for these malformations in babies. But, of course, I got a bit scared when I saw the cases, and especially when you hear the stories and see the babies, it's very sad, especially for poor families, because the treatment, it's very, very expensive for those families.
Let me ask you, Judy Stone, because it is a bit of a shock to the system when you hear public health authorities advise women not to have babies, especially in the case of El Salvador. We're talking about a country where abortion is illegal under any form. Is this just the sound standard procedure when you hear those authorities, like the ones in Colombia, say, hey, wait 6 to 8 months?
It seems very excessive to me. The other thing that they're not mentioning is that in a number of these countries, more than 50% of the pregnancies are unplanned and are a result of sexual violence against women. So women don't have control to not become pregnant. What would be, in many cases, what would be a better response would be not only the abortion issue, but to be able to have widespread access to contraception for women who want to protect themselves and not have religious constraints on access to contraception.
Do you feel as though with this outbreak, there's going to be any kind of a change in a place like El Salvador?
I don't know whether religion will still trump public health and what's rational or not. I would hope not, but I don't know that. But that's the concern that I have, and a better approach. And again, the contraception and abortion access issues put a much greater burden on poor women across the world.
Reactions coming in to our discussion. This one on Twitter. I'll put it to you, Dr. Jonathan Ball. How long does Zika stay in your system? How long should you wait to get pregnant after traveling to affected areas?
Okay, it's a very good question. So in terms of the time that the virus stays in your body, I think symptoms, if you develop symptoms, they will last around a week at maximum. There's no evidence that the virus can persist for any length of time after that. And one of the important questions that we honestly don't have an answer to as virologists is how long your immunity to the virus lasts after you've cleared the virus. Now, most of us would guess that it's very long-lived, and potentially that's why we're not seeing problems in places like Africa or Asia, where the virus has been for a very long time, because the person becomes immune to the virus. They then, are fighting off any future infection, and very often these people will pick up the virus during early childhood, for example, and therefore you won't see infections during those sort of years when they're going to give birth to offspring.
Yazdan Pana, a bit like something like tuberculosis that can come back years and years later?
Yeah, as it was said, we don't really know. It's not that all the same principle. We don't know how long the immunity lasts when you have Zika. probably less. In the case of tuberculosis, it's different because people have tuberculosis because, or reactivate tuberculosis because they are immunosuppressed with age, etc. We don't have at all these kind of information for Zika, how long it lasts, the immunity.
So how do you explain the current outbreak?
The current outbreak, like all the other outbreaks, because we have had all these outbreaks, the coronavirus, the MERS coronavirus, the SARS, we had Ebola, we have H1N1, we have chikungunya, we have Zika now. I think there are two reasons. One is that people travel much more than before. So when you have a disease in one part of the world, you may have it transport to another area very soon. And the other thing that I think is very important is that our surveillance system for detecting the diseases, our diagnosis systems for detecting the diseases are much better before. So we can detect some diseases that before we didn't even
So
detect.
ignorance is bliss. We didn't know about it, so we didn't worry?
It is not the only reason, but I think the surveillance system, the better surveillance system, it's really one piece that make us much more careful.
So this isn't some kind of monster mutation of something that was there before in this case?
No, I think this is because you have someone who was sick with Zika that traveled to another part of the world where you have mosquitoes that can develop Zika and transmit Zika, and that's what happened. So traveling and better diagnosis and surveillance.
Judy Stone, when you look at your own career, how has it changed tracking illnesses with globalization?
Oh, well, I'm never bored. The increase in travel and the globalization of economies are accounting for the rise in infections all over that we've never seen before. That and, of course, climate change, which is improving the environment and the habitat for mosquitoes, for example, in the southern U.S.
I was going to ask you about that. With the climate change, how much of the world's surface now is prone to tropical diseases?
Well, it's increasing, and we're seeing that, for example, in the southern U.S., where now we're seeing dengue and chikungunya in the Gulf states, and it's ripe for that happening for Zika to affect those areas, and California and Hawaii as well.
Jonathan Ball, I've seen some furious editorials from environmentalists over the past 48 hours, basically stating that that big climate change conference that we had in Paris was supposed to be this big wake-up call, and it hasn't really happened, and that the Zika virus is proof that the spread of tropical diseases hasn't really affected much public policy yet.
I think that's a fair accusation. So there does seem to be a disconnect between what is said in terms of an appetite to diminish global warming and the reality, which is at the moment we're going through global recessions, and therefore economic growth is very important, and unfortunately part of that seems to be burning of fossil fuels. But the reality is that climate is changing. The climate, the world's temperatures are getting warmer. What that does is mean that the areas where mosquitoes, the mosquitoes that spread things like Zika or dengue or chikungunya, their range is increasing all of the time, and therefore we start to see these viruses being introduced into southern European areas, for example, Italy, Iran, Croatia, etc. Because we've got the vectors, because we've got the mosquitoes, it's prime conditions for an increase in all of these infectious diseases. So we shouldn't be surprised that we're seeing it.
All right, when we come back, we're going to pick up on those points. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.